I played Manny Chief first game. It was hilarious. And about halfway through, Manny was just like, "You're really not well, are you?" And I was just like, "No."
Firstly, thank you so much for joining me, Sid. To
My
this,
pleasure.
I haven't really got a name for this yet. I'm still thinking whether to call it a podcast or I don't even know. But Mega Miniatures podcast.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
I've seen your stuff since joining the Knights Facebook page, which obviously
Mm.
was an amazing source for people who are learning about the army, joining it,
Mm.
and exploring lists. Yourself and Jind especially have been sharing some great concepts on there. But what inspired you to start that page in the first place?
So I've played Knights since they first came out in 2014, February 2014. They came out my local store, GW, a Games Workshop store. It was a Games Workshop store as opposed to Warhammer store back in 2014. Went into the shop, saw the options, and there were literally two options: the Knight Errant or the Knight Paladin.
Yeah.
You could basically one kit that could make two knights. Bought one, brought it home. Absolutely loved the kit. Loved the concept of a smaller model count army with a lot of the challenges that brings,
Yes.
and also the extreme limitations that it brought as well in the game, which was a great tactical. So at the time when I first started, way back in Knights, it was very exciting because it was different, completely different to what went before.
Yeah.
As the years have gone on, what made me set up the page, in answer to your question, was that I saw that there were a number of Knights pages, or you could go onto this page or that such and such page. But for competitive 40k players, specifically for Knights, there really wasn't a source. That you could go to the competitive ITC 40k page, which was generic, but I wanted to create something more than anything, a community where people could exchange positive ideas. It was the idea behind the community is supposed to be a very positive, amiable approach to the game.
Absolutely.
That's the key element. That's very much what that's what I'm interested in promoting.
And I think honestly you've done that, and I think there was a change at the weekend to kind of cement this interview within time of it turning to a private group so people can share their stuff without being seen by everyone. But
Yeah.
So from the beginning you were kind of going down the Imperial Knights route, and then
Yes.
most recently at Southampton, where you did amazingly well, and it was a really exciting list to see, and I was following along on the app to see your scores every round. And I know we've discussed in that Facebook group, but you've had a Chaos Knight army for a while. But
Yes,
what was it
yes.
that made you decide now to make a switch to doing that, and as you've suggested, potentially doing them more throughout the season?
So I fell in love with the Abominant model, and bought the Chaos Knights army box when it first came out. And unfortunately, the Abominant model is still in my pile of shame, still in the army box.
Even though that
Unbuilt.
was the one you fell in love with.
The one I fell in love with, and like everything, I practiced with it at home. I have a games room at home. I'm very fortunate in that we have a games room at the bottom of the garden, and my son and I practiced. It was the time of lockdown, if I recall correctly. No, it was just after lockdown. So he was back at work, but not fully back at work, and therefore we had a bit of time. It was May 2022, I believe the book came out, and the army box came out.
That sounds about right, yeah.
But yeah, May last year. I remember because it was a week. It was a week too late for me to submit to the Birmingham GT, which the Birmingham Supermaker, and the book came out, and the book army box came out 1 week too late, which was a bit frustrating, but it is what it is. So we played some games. I've always loved Imperial Knights. I have a large collection of Imperial Knights, and use them from then onwards. The first tournament I went to was the first legal time I could use the book, which was June, the London Open. And I think I went 4-1 there. So Imperial Knights I've always had the love of. I've developed. I think what I'd like to think of is I've developed the Imperial Knights in terms of as a faction in my own way. I'm quite unusual as a 40k player in that I'm fortunate enough between myself and my son we own every faction except for quite large collections as well.
Yeah.
Except for Votan. And that's not. There's nothing wrong with Votan. I love the models. I think they're lovely. They've done a really good job. The particular playstyles that I like, Votan don't really fulfil that. So I decided not to go down that route.
It's
But
also the latest army really that's come out, so it's
exactly. It is all them and World Eaters. My son's starting a World Eaters army, or started a World Eaters army. So yeah, he's actually very excited. We've had about 4 test games so far with a few top seed models and the models that he's brought. So,
did he follow along to see the World Eaters coming third at Southampton?
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, he was driving whilst we were driving home, and myself. There was 3 of us in the car. The other 2 of us were reporting the results to him, and we were chatting because the list he has is very similar to that list. So he now just has to get all the models assembled. He's got in the car.
Was your son playing at Southampton as well?
Yes, he was. He was playing. Unfortunately,
did you guys come up against each other?
We did in the 5th round. Yeah.
I was curious because I saw the same surname, but I just assumed it was similar surname.
There's only 2 Sidhus in the gaming community.
Oh, wow.
We're actually quite well known in the tournament circuit. We've done tournaments together since 2012. Obviously, he was very young. He was 14 at his first tournament. So he got the nickname after a year or so of the baby-faced assassin, which was an excellent. He was obviously very fresh-faced, and he was 14 when he started to go. He's a very accomplished player in his own right. And we're very fortunate in that he's very strong, and I'd like to think I'm fairly decent as well. So we're good at practicing against each other, helping each other to develop our lists. I also, so slightly digressing from your question, I started. So in September, after Birmingham, I started playing Knights. I've played the Imperial Knights solidly for 8 months. So actually, let me answer your question so that you understand my sort of thought process of turning to chaos.
Honestly, I like the spreading it out a little bit more, because honestly, I answered the question of who was the person you played there, because I said when the names came up and it was like, wow, that's brilliant. Do you know them? Is that and the fact it was your own kid. He's taller than me now, which is quite amusing, and he's actually a far better player than I am, except for in a tournament when we play each other. It's very difficult. To your training, of course. That's
well, I'm a Dark Lord of the Sid, so my surname basically in our mother tongue means holy man, so or descended from holy men, type of thing. So it's quite amusing. So SIDH, which is part of my surname, these were the Sids, as they were called, were holy men that lived up in the mountains and were sort of people would go to. They were sort of like the wise men and that sort of thing, and so that's where my family would originally, probably hundreds or thousands of years ago, would have come from, and that's where the surname comes from. But I'm digressing. I played Imperial Knights from June all the way through to the end of January, to the end of the ICC season, and one of the things that I've never liked to do is chase the current hotness or the current meta, or look at what other people are doing and go, oh, I've got those models, I'll do that. There's several reasons for that. Firstly, myself and my son have always liked to explore unusual or different armies that aren't quite what other people aren't anywhere near what other people are looking to use. That's the first thing. In my case in particular, I really don't like the idea of copying somebody's list, because I've not really brought anything to the picture into the party. In that case, I've essentially just copied and pasted something which I found somewhere else, and then I'm using that, and I might improve upon it if I use it. But actually, what have I created? I've not created anything. So I'm always of the thought. Maybe I'm a bit snobbish about this, but I think it's also a positive in that I prefer to play armies that aren't the top of the meta.
Everyone's allowed their own opinion in how they try
exactly.
things out, of course.
It is. Everyone has their own opinions about these sorts of things. So I mean, I'm a massive Ravenwing fan, and I have a huge Dark Angels collection. Byron and I both own a huge Dark Angels collection between us.
You weren't even tempted a little bit?
Oh, well, I played 17 Arcs of Omen games with Dark Angels, and I started with pure Ravenwing because that's what I love. And when I say I've got a Ravenwing collection, to give you an idea, at one stage I had 100 Ravenwing bikers and 15 Land Troopers. So my son and I used to go to Warhammer World and play on one of their large tables with our whole collection of Ravenwing bikes, and he'd however many thousands and thousands of points of Tau, and we had a blast. We play for 10 hours, and that's the sort of joyous games we used to have when he was growing up as a teenager, spending the whole day in Warhammer World, literally just playing the same game over a board, and we've had some great times and great memories together doing that. So getting back to Knights specifically, so having played them for 8 months pretty solidly, I looked at what my different options were for the next ITC season. Now, I could have just carried on playing my custom household, but I tried using the Ravenwing and then the Ravenwing mixed wing build over 17 competitive Arcs games, and to be honest with you, to lean into the partial Death Wing, the 50-50 build of 20 to 25 Terminators is not my playstyle.
Yeah,
I've got 45 Deathwing Terminators that I've made and painted over the years, and I've actually used them at a one-day tournament previously. And to be frank, I was bored. I literally just was bored playing them. So I'm not going to go to an event purely on the basis of I want to win every game and be bored doing it. I'd rather go to an event where I'm actually excited and have a lot of energy in each game, and I enjoy using the army I'm playing, because for me, going to an event over a weekend is a social experience as well as a competitive experience. So I'm looking for more than just trying to win 5 games. I'm actually looking to enjoy playing every game, and playing with an army that's below or considered below tier, but being a specialist in that army means more to me, I guess, than playing the latest hotness. And actually, it's very easy to go, oh, look, I've got the guard, I've got this guard, I've got a huge guard army, or Astra Militarum as they're now called it. And it'd be very simple for me to put that on the table and say, well, I've sort of auto won against certain people, which is a horrible way to say it, but one can almost auto win with guard at the moment before they get reined in, I think. I'm not taking anything away from anyone using guard, but there are certain elements in that book which are just so strong that...
Of course. I mean, overall, David won the tournament with them. But at the same time, he's a very good player, so it kind of comes together.
Indeed. Yeah, so I think looking at... we were... a number of myself and my teammates were cheekily smirking away together, chatting on our group chat to say, it's nice to see that all the very top ICC players have given themselves a challenge by only using the top factions this year. And nothing like it was quite amusing because none of those players, without again nothing negative to any of those players, they're completely within their rights to play those factions, which is as a top player, I suspect what one has to do to get into the top 10 in the world, to actually compete for the ICC title at the end of the season. One has to shift into factions that are the strongest at that time to get the points that they need on the board, which is complete respect to them to be able to do that. it's not something that I prefer doing. As I said, I prefer to make and create something myself, which is unique. So with Knights, when I started with Knights, Imperial Knights this season, my first tournament was the London Open. I went 4-1. Strange enough, I played David in Game 5, and
Oh, really?
I played him. David and I have played each other 4 times at UKTC events, and we've always played each other Game 5, which is hilarious. We've never played each other before Game 5, but we've always played each other Game 5. So
Nice
the first of those,
every tournament, yeah.
sorry? Yeah, oh, exactly. It's the game prior to the final. So the first game we played was actually October 2021, which was the London Open. I was using another type of knights, grey knights this time. So I love grey knights, another type of knights, but I love grey knights. I've played them since 5th edition, and I have about a 6,000 point army of them.
Oh, wow.
And absolutely adore using them. Most of the armies I have are about 5,000 to 6,000 points. Some of the, I've got some of the armies I have are slightly smaller. They'll probably be about 3,000 points, but most of them would be about 5,000 to 6,000 points. So I've got options within.
So you can play with different elements.
We've collected for a long time, and my elder army, our house is actually named after a craft world. So our house is actually called Iandon, and I have a significant Eldar army, as you can imagine, as a result of the fact that I love all things Eldari as well. Strangely,
I'll leave that out of the recording just in case someone decides to try and find you.
It's hard to find. It's not the actual name of the house. It's just what we've had put at the front. So that's fine.
Okay,
if you want to leave it out. It's such and such house number, but we've just had it put on the house
No, that's
sign.
fine. I didn't want to put something in that directs people to where you are.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So when Knights came out and said, so getting back to playing David, it's October 2021. We competed in the London Open, Game 5, and I was using Grey Knights. He was using Admech when they were utterly the strongest thing out there at that time. Admech and Drupari were the 2 brutal factions. Malik Rubio, who's a friend of mine, had just won the London GT, the LGT, with them in 2021 in October. And then towards the end of October was the London Open, which is about 140 players approximately. So David and I played each other, and he had Admech. We had Malik on table 1, myself and David on table 2 in Game 5, and I managed to beat David by about 8 or 9 points, or 10 points approximately.
Wow.
That was quite a... I didn't know who he was, and obviously his profile has moved up significantly. I'm an old hat in the tournament scene. A lot of the older tournament players know who I am, and I don't think David knew who I was. Malik certainly knew me, obviously. And so to give you an idea as to how long I've been playing tournaments, Manny Chima used to be a fresh-faced teenager when I first met him. So he's anything but a fresh-faced teenager now, in the nicest possible way. He's a good guy. He's a funny guy. But yeah, so I have been doing tournaments for quite a while. So I beat David there, and we then played each other again at the next London Open, where I took Imperial Knights, which was June 2022, June last year. And he was using his Leviathan army pre any nerfs. And unfortunately, it wasn't a close game. I think he beat me on about 40 points or so. But it was a good game, and it was very clear it was going to go one way quite quickly. And we had a good chat about it afterwards. And then we met at the Unconquerable event, which was run by UKTC. Again, Game 5, and I was actually very relaxed at that point in the day. Neither of us were on to win the event, so I actually was completely chilled out and relaxed. And before the game started, David said, I would like to get home early. So I decided to actually, help him get home early by losing the game. And he kept on asking. He asked me after the game, "Why did you do this?" And I was like, well, you wanted to get home early, so I thought I'd give you my models for next to nothing and sacrifice them easily. And he was just like, oh, okay. And so it sort of dawned on him that I actually really wasn't bothered about the game at all. which was hilarious because I actually was more interested in going to watch some of the other games. My son was there as well.
Yeah.
I was actually more interested in his game and a couple of the other games that my friends were playing. So I thought if I could get this over within, an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half, I can actually explore the hall, chat to people, and also go and see some of the other games, which is exactly what happened. David left after about an hour and 45 minutes of the game was over in an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes, and then we chatted afterwards, and he was scratching his head and saying, "But if you just did this, this would have happened." And I was like, I know I could have done that, but I actually didn't want to do that because I didn't really want to win the game. I wasn't really bothered. Which was hilarious watching his reactions, and he was sort of like looking up and down, going, "Oh, right, okay." Because he was really wanting to win the game, and I wasn't interested particularly either way. It, would have been nice to win it, but it didn't actually matter to me. So, but I think that shows the distinction in where we are as players. I'm more interested in the social aspects of the hobby. And I think, obviously in the last ICC scene, he went to LVO, as did my good friend Vic VJ, and Mike Porter, with the view of them trying to win. I was obviously trying to back up the UK guys. Vic's an absolute gentleman. I've got a lot of time for him. And I've known Mike Porter for many years. In fact, Mike and I contested a LGT final, I think way back, it was 2017. Oh, wow. We were in an LGT final together. It was when the LGT was only 5 games. It was 8th edition. Both of us had a mirror match, game 5. We shook hands beforehand, and it was one of the funniest games ever. He's an absolute gentleman, Mike Porter. I really can't say enough good things about him. Yeah, and also Vic.
I'd love to talk to him one day about his Harlequins, because he just dominates the field way more than anyone else is doing at the moment. Yeah, it's crazy.
Very much so. Well, that's it. He really has been, and he's been playing them for a very long time. Yes. Long before they were fashionable, or they were the strong faction. He's played them throughout 8th. So he and I were both playing Custodes at that, and we won fair and square. I think I ended up. It was a big event. It was the first large LGT run by Zach, significantly larger than all the others. If I recall correctly, it was 440 players. Wow. And I think I ended up around 15th in the end, which was way beyond my expectations.
That's awesome.
It was a great event. A lot of fun, and again, I ended up actually playing 3 people I knew, which was, bear in mind the size of the field was unusual, but I think it's also testament to the fact that the community we have is people do know each other. It's a large community, but it's also people are very friendly and know each other. So getting back to Knights, we've gone a long way round.
Well, no, I mean, one thing I was kind of curious on was looking at the rundown from Southampton, there was a fair few. There was kind of like an even mix of Imperial versus Chaos Knight players.
No, correct. Yes.
But the Imperials, the top one was like 70th. I mean, he did very well. He did win 3 games, and and his list looks fantastic. But the Chaos one seemed to all tip just further down, up the field in terms of scoring. What do you kind of put that down to? Do you think it's just that Knights is attracting kind of top players in quotes, or is it?
I think what you'll find is it's only in terms of Imperial Knights. I found this in the group in the Knights group, is that Chaos Knights. If I compare the 2 factions, Chaos Knights on paper, if I look at my Imperial Knights army and my Chaos Knights army, on paper, the Imperial Knights are stronger against almost everybody, except against Chaos Knights.
Oh, interesting.
So that's the interesting little nuanced thing that I've noticed. So whenever I've played against Chaos Knights, I have played a number of times against Chaos Knights and won, but it's a very, very difficult matchup. It's probably one of the hardest matchups I personally would face with my existing Imperial Knights army, which I used until the end of until the end of January.
Again,
Now,
you had 13 armigers in both lists, don't you?
that 13 Armigers, 13 Mordogs. So the 13 Armigers idea came about probably from around the end of July last year, and initially I tried it out, found it was it was a revelation. It was literally as if, what have I been doing? I've been using. So I was very aggressive when I started with Knights. I had an errant, 6 Warglaves and 4 Helverens, and the errant had Master of Vox, so he could broadcast to any model, advance and charge, and that coupled with the Imperial Knights stratagem to advance 9 inches automatically, full tilt. That's it. So you could go 21 inches with an errant, boosting you from anywhere on the table, to have damage reduction, and then still charge. It terrified a lot of people early on when I played that, and it took a while for me to realise that errant is 450 points, a lot of points. So my Imperial Knights household is House Targaryen, and the errant was called Daenerys, of course. But
makes sense.
I thought, well, the fact that the errant had, I would shout Dracarys whenever I used calculated targeting as a strat.
Love it.
It had to be done, and when it worked, that's when I shouted Dracarys. When I rolled a few 6s, and my opponent I'd explain to my opponent what the strat was before I did it. Before the game would start. Just and it was at the time of Nackman, so we had the CPs to do it. So I'd explain to my opponent, look, this is what she could do. This is what Daenerys can do. She's the head of the house. She's the queen. This is what she can do. Just be aware. Her range is this. This is her threat range. And certain players would say, well, yeah, but how bad could it be? Now, I used, an unusual army when I first started with the Imperial Knights. I went for House Crast. And people were not using House Crast. And I looked at their Wall of Trait. Now, their Wall of Trait, which Daenerys had, along with Iron Bulwark, so she had 2 Wall of Traits. Her Wall of Traits, which is a Crast specific, allows you to pick a virtuous ability that you have as one of your oaths and be virtuous. So you have Defend the Realm, and I had Lay Low the Tyrants, which is the reroll to hit or change your dice roll to a 6. In the case of virtuous, you change your dice roll to a 6. Now, I could pick that in my command phase of which of those 2 virtuous abilities I'd like active at the start of my command phase. A lot of people didn't quite appreciate having a 10-wound OBSEC Titanic model that wasn't OBSEC until I needed her to be OBSEC, was quite clutch. And she did kill a lot of things, and she earned a lot of points for me with that particular Wall of Treasure, etc. But unfortunately, the list developed, or fortunately, I should say, the list developed. So as soon as I hit 13 Armigers, I literally didn't look back. The dynamic of the list changed completely. It became a lot more efficient at damage dealing. I could afford to lose models. If 2 or 3 Armigers died in a turn, which used to happen even with bondsman abilities on them, it was a disaster. 2 or 3 Armigers died in a turn, I'm completely on the defensive. It's likely I'm going to be trying to edge things in my favour. 2 or 3 Armigers die when you've got 13, that's not a disaster. And that's the difference with having 13. You've got more assets to expend.
Absolutely.
That's a horrible way of saying it, but I can trade better. And you also have the benefit of everything in your army being 5 models OBSEC. So if you want an objective, you put 3 models on it. It's very difficult for people to remove all 3.
Taking 15 off is not normal.
Unless they've got a lot of OBSEC or they've got the ability to do so. And there are games when my opponents would just give up trying to remove the models off certain objectives. They say, well, look, you've got those 2 objectives. We're not even going to go close to them because we can't challenge you. Now, the army that I took to the London Grand Tournament this year, which was a sort of a creation, again, a unique creation. I had the army in my head from July, but I didn't really want to use it before the LGT. And again, this is perhaps going back to the fact that I'm a bit unusual. I like to have unique ideas, and for the LGT, it was a big event. The largest event in Europe we've seen for many years. It was over 720 players, just at the 40k event. I wanted to take something which was unusual, and I managed to go 7 rounds with it. So it was a custom household strike and shield, or House Targaryen as I've called them, and it hit people between the eyes. So at the time we had a lot of combat armies. We had an awful lot of Necrons were in their peak. I've never lost a game to Necrons with Knights. It's never happened. Not even come close.
Is your Imperialist, sorry to ask, you're going 6 Warglaives, 6 Helverins, and then one more?
It's a very simple list, and it's very efficient. So it's 6 Helverins, 3 of which are Strike and Shield, 3 of which are Hunters of Beasts. So Strike and Shield is an Imperialist, so they can go in the same detachment. And then it's 6 Warglaives, all of which are Strike and Shield. Right. Then the final model, which goes in a separate detachment, which is the Super Heavy Auxiliary detachment, is a Lightning Lock Morax with a free blade. She's a Mechanicus. That model's a Mechanicus model, and it has, it still has Last of their Line as its ability. And Last of their Line allows full rerolls against 6 or more models. With Exploding Sixes, she's a very good model against armies of 10 plus wound, 6 or units of 10.
So
she's a big model. She's great at clearing them out. She's fantastic at Guard, Eldar, Necron Warriors, you name it. She's very good at clearing them out, because even if she's bear in mind, Lightning Locks have 36-inch range as well. Yes. That model would often be my model that would be going into reserve, because the ability to pop up and go and hit something on the flanks or anything like that was scary for a lot of players, and she alone won me games by being so strong. Now in Arcs, when I adjusted the list with the new Arcs of Omen meta, she got a Warlord trait, which was Blessed by the Sacristans, to do mortals on a 6 to wound in addition. So her efficiency went up even more. So again, that's the sort of tech piece that a lot of other players wouldn't necessarily have thought about. Having Last of the Line is the classic example of having a great thing on there. Hunters of Beasts, we all know how good they are, and they're very good. What I found in the matchup is you need to have a balance. 7 shooting, 6 combat is just about the right balance. Yeah. All the Warglaives have melter guns, and obviously naturally thermal spheres and Reaper chain glaives. So having all that melter is also useful, because you can add to the ability. Having 9 models with Strike and Shield, which I don't know if you're aware of what it does. You have 2 aspects to Strike and Shield. Aspect number 1 is not too much to write home about. You ignore AP -1 in combat. Handy, but not shattering. Yeah. Aspect number 2, which is the most important part, is you can only be hit on a 4+ in combat.
Yeah,
now,
it's the Dark Angel's kind of Terminator ability, isn't it?
But that's to be wounded. This is to be hit.
Oh, okay.
So it trans hits them. So it essentially, a lot of armies that are relying on hitting you in combat, Blood Angels being an example, Custodes being an example, Chaos Space Marines are very, very hot in the meta at that time. Hitting on 2s, suddenly going to hitting on 4s makes them a lot worse. Necron Scorpex with +1 to hit on them would be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, suddenly go to hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s. Their efficiencies of being able to kill a knight, kill an armiger, suddenly drops significantly. So I played a number of players with creations of opponents that had creations of Baal armies, and before LGT, and they couldn't put a glove on us. They couldn't get through the knights quickly enough, because they charge you. I would almost let them charge me. They'd hit me, and they'd bounce, because they're only hitting on 4s. And if you do the maths, let's say it's a squad of 5 possessed. That's 26 attacks from a squad of 5 possessed. on average, they hit 13 times. They only wound on 5s. So that's 4.25 wounds on a knight.
Yeah.
And I have a 5-up armor save. Now, I can boost my armor save by +1, so I have 4 up. So they get 2 to 3 wounds through. That may not even bracket the knight. And then the knight hits back. And then the knight can shoot them and fight them in the next phase.
Yeah.
So you can see the efficiency of how that particular army is one example where people were scared of Creation Zabal, and Striking Shield just stopped that. And Necron Scorpex, again, a good squad of them. Squad of 5 should just chop through an Armiger without any problems. A squad of 6 of them with the 2 large weapons should just kill an Armiger, but not when they've got trans-hitman on them. So I found the one thing that really kept the Knights alive was that trans-hitman, and it worked very, very efficiently. I was really pleased with, my placing at LGT. I came 12th overall, and that was way above my expectations. I lost to Vic in Game 7, and I was rooting for him to win. Unfortunately, he ended up coming 3rd. One of my teammates, Ewan, came 5th, so really pleased by that as well.
Great. On a personal note, so I'm taking Knights properly for the first time to a team tournament locally in Norwich, and then the GW Warhammer Fest for one of the 1,000-point ones. I feel that's kind of a good way for me to get started off with Knights, try it out, see 1,000 points goes, and then build up to the full thing. What might you suggest someone, not just myself, but someone who's kind of interested in Knights starting about a 1,000-point game? What kind of models might you recommend them going with?
Okay, so at 1,000 points, I personally wouldn't take a large knight. That's not because I run loads of Armigers myself. I have about just under 50 knights.
They would just take up the half the army, one big knight.
They take up approximately 500 points of your army, which at that level is too much. You want to try and have more assets on the board, and also you want to be able to develop the ability to use them. Knights are unusual because we have no models that can fly. We have to physically move around buildings, etc., and obstacles. So it's a very different army to your average infantry army. Cool. It's a low model count. So the advantage that you have is that one can perhaps buy 4 boxes of Armigers, and that would be well over 1,000 points.
Yeah.
And it allows you to perhaps, so that would be my suggestion, would be to take full Armigers initially, get used to using them, work out your particular playstyle. I think the crucial bit of advice I give any player, that when they ask me for advice as to what should I do with this, is how do you prefer to play?
Yeah.
As opposed to this is the way to win, because that way to win may not be how they will enjoy playing the game.
I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I have much more fun in a sense of, I think a while ago I accepted I'm not going to be the top player, it's not how I think about the game. I kind of really enjoy it. So as long as I'm having fun, that's why I'm there.
Exactly.
I think that's what's drawn me to Knights a little bit. The idea I can be like, here's just some big models on the table, let's go, bit of fun. And I think there was I saw an interview with Jind for the 40k in 40 minutes, and he said how he likes Knights because he can finish the game quicker and spend more time with his kids. And I was like, that sounds wonderful.
One of the reasons I use Imperial Knights, and I love the new codex, this 9th edition codex, the games are quick, and you don't have to think too much because there's only certain options that one has.
Yes.
You don't have to overthink every single move, because in 1,000 points, for argument's sake, you might have 7 or 8 models. You don't have 40 models to think about. You don't have 8, 9, you don't have 20 units. And this character with this buff does this and this stuff and this. And in the command phase, I need to remember this. I need to remember this. Sorry, I'm talking very quickly, but the amount of thought process that has to go into certain armies. I played my friend, one of my teammates, Luke, who's an avid guard player. He is a very, very intelligent physicist. Very, very shit, switched on, very, very sharp. And watching him stress in the command phase about orders.
Yeah.
And this is somebody who's very good at the game, about making sure each order and each model that gets the right order, the right distance. It's just so much hard work. And watching him play and watching the expression on his face, it's tough watching your friends go through that. Whereas with Knights, you don't have to go through that. You can actually have an enjoyable experience. Whenever I'm at an event, so I'm digressing slightly from your question, but whenever I'm at an event, I always play on a clock competitively, obviously, at tournaments. When I get clocked over to me, I normally just chat to my opponent half the time. And they're sort of looking at me going, the clock's running now. I was like, yeah, but it's on my time. Relax, guys. I'm playing Knights. Well, I'm not going to run out of time. And I never have. It's never happened, in best part of, I must have had over 100 tournament games comfortably with Knights since the Codex tournament, with the Imperial Knights. And in that time, I don't think I've never clocked out. Not even close to it. So I think the closest has probably been about 15 minutes, and one can relax, you can have a conversation, you can think about your moves, you can play the game at a pace that's actually enjoyable, you can have fun. Each dice roll matters, and there's nothing quite like rolling that crucial 4 up at the right time. It's actually a lot of fun, and it's a lot of enjoyment. I use the analogy that, essentially we are people that play, as 40k players, we are rolling dice is a gamble. We're betting, we're gambling, but we're gambling with toy soldiers, and we're having fun doing it. The dice gods can roll for us hot on one day, badly on the other.
Yeah. But
that's the joy and the fun in the game. That's why we play the game. We don't play the game because we know the outcome. We play the game because we don't know what the dice are going to say on that given day, and that's what makes it exciting. So to a newcomer tonight, buy some Armigers, buy some War Dogs, work out what you want to get from the game. The nicest thing about Armiger models is, of course, one can magnetize their arms, and one can use them as either a Warglaive or a Helverin or a Morax without any issues. And that's the great thing about Knight armies, in that in terms of the models, if you're an Imperial Knights player, you have very few data sheets. If you're starting out at 1,000 points and not going for a large knight, which I'd advise you not to do, that's the only real bit of advice to say. Start getting used to using pure vehicle armies without the infantry, with smaller knights, and then add a larger knight of your choice.
Would you say it's worth bringing the Moirax, like the lightning guy, into the 1,000 points one, just for that?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it may be something you want to do. I mean, it's the most expensive Armiger model.
Yeah, oh yes, of course. Yeah, because it's 4
at 160. It's 165 points because of the arm cost.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
so the arms cost 155. With the arms cost 5 points each, the model itself is 155, so it's 165 points in points terms. I'm not talking about the monetary value, I'm talking about the points terms. Halverins are slightly cheaper, they're 155. They fulfill a different role with their long-range fire support. They're your backfield objective holders. They are amazingly efficient. They're one of my favourite units in the game, and the amount of jaws that have dropped at the abilities that Halverins, the amount of firepower that they can put out, it terrifies people. I played a Harlequins player when Harlequins were at their peak, and he's a very good Harlequins player, and the look on his face as he watched, he said, well, he was playing light at the time, which was pre-nerf, pre any of the nerfs, not light, and he said, I think we'll be okay. So he kept his models in his boats. I think we shot down 5 boats in a turn. He couldn't hold any objectives. And when he did eventually charge, of course, we can shoot in combat. So Knights have abilities that other armies just don't have. So I think initially stick with an Armiger build or a War Dog build. Play to your strengths. If you're the sort of person that loves combat, build a more combat-focused army. I think the only negative, I would say, in terms of Imperials is their combat output can be a bit limited because they don't have the options that the Chaos Knights have.
Yeah, you kind of got
But
Warglaive, and that's really it, isn't it?
you've got the Warglaive. You can have a Morax with claws, but
That's
the
true.
claws, because the claws are that you can have double claws or a single claw. The claws are very anti-vehicle. They're D6 plus 2 damage against vehicles, but unfortunately, then the book was the Imperial Armor Compendium was written a while ago, and the claws are -1 to hitting combat. So it does put people off using them, unfortunately. So essentially, you have a choice of 3 models of your Imperial. You have 6 data sheet choices for the War Dogs, one of which is the Morax, and 5 within the Codex for Chaos Knights. So a bit more choice with Chaos, but
Yeah.
that would be my advice. Get used to playing the army with those smaller models because they're actually very useful in the game. They will steer you towards your preferred playstyle as well, potentially. And the great thing is magnetize your weapons because you can switch between them very easily. I think we use 3x2 magnets, I believe, on mine. So they work very. No, sorry, it's 5x2. I can't remember the size exactly, but they work. They work a treat, and it's great because you can switch between them so readily.
Perfect.
Strange enough, on this Friday, I'm hosting a friend that a chap I met at a tournament, who was getting into Chaos Knights. He didn't take Chaos Knights to that event. He was a friend of a friend's, and it was the first I was introduced to him, and by our mutual friends. And he and I are playing a game on Friday where he's bringing his current Chaos Knights, and he's borrowing a number of some of my models to try out his. He's built an army. He's been painting it furiously, and he and I have been talking about tactics, how to get the most out of his army, what he wants to do with it, how he wants to progress it, the avenue he wants to go down, and it's really great to listen and help somebody, improve or to get into the faction in that way. So that would be my advice. Start small. Are you planning any events, perhaps towards London directions at all? Or
I'm definitely doing the LGT, but that's like September time.
Yeah.
So it's a bit further away. But other than that, there's a few coming up in the EA. They're called EAGTs in Norfolk now. So if you find your way up here, then there's a couple coming up. So.
I've actually played at I played a tournament and won a tournament years ago, 6th edition.
Oh, really?
With an elder at I'm trying to remember the name of the club. The club, it was at a scout hall.
That's where it is. Yeah. So there's
it'll be that club.
Last Stand.
So I've been there twice. Once with Eldar and the other time with Custodes. And the Custodes, unfortunately, I was actually ill on the day. I drove up. I was not feeling great and played my first game, and I just couldn't quite finish the game. I was so ill. So I played Manny cheaper first game. It was hilarious. And about halfway through, Manny was just like, "You're really not well, are you?" And I was just like, "No." And so I sort of stopped playing the game. I just couldn't continue. So I unfortunately sort of had to sleep in the car for an hour and then drive home just to sort of recover my wits a little. And my wife was a bit shocked to see me, back home looking very pale. But we'll certainly try and get up to a tournament up there one day.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sid. I better call it off there, but
no problem.